Okay, without further ado, give our first time BSPUG, long-time member, part of the planning and all the things we do with SharePoint Saturday, but is in the role of speaker. And this came up, this was something cool he was doing that he just casually mentioned at a meeting. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. And now we're here. This is actually really good stuff, which is why we've been trying to stream it for it, because people want to hear about it. So take it away.
Okay.
Thank you.
So if you need to catch up later, of course, it's going to be recorded, or we'll be talking about an online menu that I was asked to create as a sample, just to see like a proof of concept to see if it can be done for a Navy mess that needed to see if they could do an online version of ordering from their kitchen. So a little bit about me. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I work for a Alaskan 8A company that's contracted by the government, and as part of that, I'm program manager by trade, and I play with SharePoint on the side because I get to play with all these fun toys. I operate the site collection for the PMO that I work in, and that's where I've done most of my learning on how to use SharePoint. I've been working with SharePoint since around 2006, and so I've seen upgrades from 2007 to 2010 and 2010 to 2013. So I've seen some of the fun things that go along with trying to transition from one version to another. Okay, so some of the things we're going to look at. The challenge, what the current situation was, trying to gather some requirements to figure out what they want, building the proof of concept, showing it to them, finding out what changes they wanted, enhancing that, and then how was the actual proof of concept created, and some of the code that goes behind it. So I'll actually show you some of the JQuery and JavaScript that I used in order to create the menu. And we'll actually go through a demo and you can see the menu in action. So I was asked one Friday, can you create an online ordering system in SharePoint? The Navy mess was asking for a project to have an online ordering system, and they wanted to see about purchasing one in the open market. Most of the open market systems are $150,000, $200,000 just to start off with. So they wanted to find out, since we already have SharePoint, can you do it in SharePoint? So and then after that it says, can you come up with a proof of concept that I can show off on Monday? This was Friday. So I had a lot of help from my bride trying to put in data in order to make a proof of concept work. So that made for an interesting end of Friday, into the week. So what they had is they do orders by phone. And so they sit at a phone and have their own point of sale system that goes back into the kitchen. And answer the phone. They tell them what they want. They ask them, okay, what kind of soup do you have today? What sandwiches? What's your specials for the day? Because at times they don't have the menu in front of them. At times they do have a menu, but a lot of times they don't have a menu. So they have to answer a lot of questions and do it by phone and then punch in manually into their point of sale. So this was geared to try to eliminate that whole situation, and they can start off doing an order and have it flow all the way to the final kitchen point of sale process. But we're going to start off, the first phase of it is just to get an online ordering system, and then go ahead and have them transfer from a screen into their point of sale. Everything is set up exactly the way they are expecting to see the food items instead of answering a lot of questions and talking on the phone. And along with it, everything had to be on an on-premise on-premise version. And it's a government system, so you can't have a lot of extra things to play with. So I have JQuery that I could play with. I've got JavaScript, which of course JQuery is a piece of, but I didn't have a lot of other toys to work with as far as other code that I could bring in to enhance the JavaScript experience. So, met with the stakeholders, found out a lot about people placing the orders, talked to the people currently taking the orders to find out what they're looking for. And of course, the key people, you have to get approval by the leadership. That was one of the biggest things whenever I created the demo. I'd give it out to the people who use it. It says, okay, looks fine, but I got to get approval from our bosses. And in the place where we were, the bosses were not always available to give good feedback right away. So you had to wait a week or two before they even decided to log in and look at it. Or had to be prompted, here, let me sit at your desk. Tell me what you think. So I was given this as the initial, what they currently have, and say, we want it to look similar to this. So they have a menu that shows what it is, a description, the price, how many calories, little icons that say if it's like heart healthy, if it's gluten-free, is it kosher-like? Because unfortunately they didn't have a kosher kitchen, so it had to just be kosher-like. And they could pick categories from the side, but they couldn't order anything. So it was just, it was static for the most part, and you can select which menu. They have a breakfast menu, a lunch menu, and a dinner menu. And they wanted, of course, this to be very similar because they didn't want to shock the customers into a whole new experience. They're already used to what they had. So try to design something around the same basic concept. So phase one was using the existing menu to model the same look and feel. Have my breakfast, lunch, and dinner menus. They have daily specials so that there might be a certain food item that they're going to serve for only 1 week. And then it will be dropped from the menu, and you might have another item that comes up, or a list of things that they have that are time-based. And then you have a long list of items that are all the time. So 2 types of menu items, plus you have different options. So if you have an omelet, what kind of items goes with an omelet? Do you want cheese? Do you want ham? Do you want bacon? Do you want tomatoes? I know you don't want tomatoes. But different things that you can add to an omelet. They wanted the ability to select those different options. And then they wanted an email to go to the person to give them a status as to what's happening with their order. Their order's been placed, and later on, their order's ready for pickup, or at times, in some cases, somebody else might be placing an order for another person, like a secretary can be placing an order for their boss. The email would go to the secretary and their boss so that they knew that somebody had placed an order for them. And then, of course, after that, for the first phase, the order is transferred then to the point of sale system manually. So then the second phase would be the website would be then directly pushed to the point of sale system that would make the ordering process complete from one end to the other. Now, in order to do that, their current point of sale system is standalone, so all the equipment that goes into that house has to be brought into the current network. This is actually what stopped the entire project and they didn't go any further because they were not able to move that system into our network for a lot of different various reasons. So, had to work on a government system, work within SharePoint. There was no server-side code, so I wasn't using .NET or any other code that I could load onto a server, so it was all client-based code. I was able to use, I was going to use advanced workflows for some of phase 2 in order to move data between SharePoint and the point of sale system, because that way I could create a file with the data necessary in a package and then move that file into the point of sale file system to be processed by the point of sale system. But when I started off, there was no advanced workflows. We had SharePoint 2010 workflows. Out of the box, just the basic workflow. So only thing I could do with workflows at that time was build the email portion to send email notifications. So proof of concept. This is what was come up with. This is a little bit more than the proof of concept because the menus didn't have meal times, and there was a couple other pieces. So, but it has a basic same look and feel as the original piece. It gives the menu, it gives categories, it shows you what the menu item is, shows you your calories, gives you icons for special things about that particular food item, the price, but it also adds the ability to add items to a cart. So we went through and things were going well. They liked the proof of concept. This is exactly what they were looking for. They just wanted to know, when can we get it to where we can go all the way through to the point of sale system. Things that we did add to it is choice and radio options for selecting food item options, because there might be some cases where you have a hamburger. Do I want the hamburger to be rare, medium well? You can only select one of those because you can't select all of them for one hamburger. So you have a radio button for that type of an option. But if you're looking for adding lettuce, tomato, onions, mustard, and ketchup to a sandwich, well, that's not a radio type option. That's more of a selection option. So there was choice and radio options added to it in order to do that. They wanted it delegate ordering for multiple people, for a secretary to order for either one person, or that one person could order for like up to 6 different people. And so it was added in so that you can have somebody ordering for another person. And then there was specific meal ordering times. They didn't want somebody ordering for breakfast at lunchtime, or they didn't want somebody ordering dinner at lunchtime. They wanted them to order during the time of the meal with an ability to order up to 1 hour before the meal actually starts. So, in order to go through and do the option selection, this is an example of one of the menu items. So you have 2 different sets of radio buttons. Do I want mustard, and what kind of mustard? Do I want cheese, and what kind of cheese? And do I want, since this one comes with lettuce, tomatoes, and onions, it gives you an option to remove those particular items or to add ketchup and relish. So it gave a way to do a way to customize your order instead of just picking something from a list, which was basically the only thing that was available off the original list. You saw what they had, and then they had to explain, can you add this, can you add that, and then figure out how to put that into their point of sale system manually through a phone call. So then at the end, it gives you a summary of what your order is, and it breaks down and says, okay, I ordered a turkey sandwich. I wanted gluten-free bread with Swiss cheese and light mayonnaise. And the gluten-free bread had an additional cost, so it was able to calculate costs of additional items, give you a total. And like here, I ordered my my black bean veggie burger, and it goes through and I add mustard and cheddar cheese, and I took off the lettuce, tomatoes, and onions, but added ketchup and relish, just to add a variety. And then I ordered 2 of them because I had a friend that was with me that wanted to try one also. So I was able to add a second one, and it's able to calculate that out. And then if I added another feature for special instructions. So if there was something special that they wanted that was not available, they could put some type of a special instruction in there, just to make sure that there was an option for things like if you ordered a bottle of water, okay, I want a bottle of water that's at room temperature instead of cold. So you can put that in the special instructions and they can know what to do. So it was done with out-of-the-box SharePoint as far as its base, but you can't use just the out-of-the-box in order to create the look and feel. If you create a list, you're not going to be able to get a list to look exactly like what they're looking for, and to get the look and feel with the options that they had just by using the out-of-the-box look and feel. So with a little bit of HTML, some CSS to give us some good colors and fonts and stuff, some JavaScript and jQuery, we built our proof of concept. So it took me, I was probably working on and off for about 3-4 months to get the completed items, and it currently has probably close to 2,200 lines of code in order to create the full menu. So, demo. What does it actually look like in real life? So this is the menu. I had fun transferring this from its current environment over to Office 365, but fortunately with the fact that I built the code to be mostly transportable, I didn't have to change a lot of items in order to get it to work in that environment. I think my biggest problem is I misspelled one of my lists and had to go in and find it in the code and change it in the code and not on the list, because once you make the list, you're stuck with it unless you delete it and start all over again. And I already had items in it. I wasn't going to do that. So as you can see here, you scroll down, it's got a large number of different options that we can choose from. And let's see here, we'll go ahead and choose our black bean veggie burger. And there it pops up with our selection, where we can go through and we'll put some brown mustard on there with some provolone and
No tomatoes.
no tomatoes. Yes, no tomatoes. We'll add some relish. And then when you're finished with that, you can add that to the cart. So the people knew what items were in their cart. I had it to where it changed the color of my indicator here to show that there's a difference, and it gives me a number that I added one item. I can actually go through and either click on the name, or I can come over and click on this to get to the same piece. And say I want another one with exactly the same options. I can add that to the cart. I now have 2. And then, just so some of the things you can do, say I want to add ketchup to one, and I'm going to order a third one. So now I have 3 total sandwiches on here.
So if you want to make it 2, like, what are you going to do? Like, let's say I don't want 3, I want 2. So you have to go to the cart and...
So if you want to get rid of one,
Yeah.
I come back up and go to the cart. Now here it shows me what's currently in my cart. If I want to remove an item, I only want 1 instead of 2 of this one. I click remove. I now have 1. And since I want to go back to my order, I'm going to go back to edit order. And then if I scroll on down to here, if you notice this number has now changed back to 2 because I only have 2 ordered. And you can go through and you can order some fruit. So I'm just going to go ahead and order the banana. Okay, I'm going to order the apple. I was thinking about a banana, but went for the apple. Okay.
So,
Yes.
how many lists do you have supporting this?
I have 1 list for the list of items. I have another list for the specials from the day. I have a list of options. I have a list for the categories. I also have a list that shows what the final order is. And those are my main lists that I use. So if I go back through and view my cart, you can see the apple that I ordered. I'm now down to 1 type of black bean veggie burger with ketchup and relish, and 1 with just relish. So if I submit my order, I left this part in here just as an illustration. This is the code that it takes to send to the point of sale system in order for the point of sale system to understand the order, where it asks for the item, what it is, and a special number that corresponds with that particular item. And so I developed it so that it can put this little text package together. And then part of doing that would be then to transfer that text into a text file and move that file over into the point of sale file system. And then it would automatically know when it saw a new file to process it. So then after that, it says it doesn't like me. Why it did that, I'm not quite sure. It was working for me at home. It says forbidden. So apparently I had an authentication error somewhere.
Network.
Yeah. So maybe I dropped authentication sometime while here.
Yeah, we're all good too.
So we'll see whether or not the authentication actually still works. I'm going to go over to site contents and see if it pops up. Okay. Yes, there it shows. So there's the different lists that I have. So I had here food categories, items of the day, which are my specials, menu items, which are my standard menu type items. Mess delegates and mess members are people who can order. Mess delegates is people who can order for other people, and mess members are people who can actually receive the food because they had to pay for it. The mess members are the ones that actually make the payment. There's options and then the actual orders. So it doesn't take a whole lot of different lists, but it does take a couple of lists that are used together.
How many columns you got in orders?
Um,
Trying to understand
Orders.
the data structure.
okay.
Demo.
No, that's options. I want orders.
I was trying to understand the data structure for capturing,
Yeah.
2 of these and
So-
1 of these and...
It doesn't have to do a lot of the calculating within it, because all it has to do is have this XML summary,
Oh,
and the system on the other end, the point of sale system, is the one that calculates all the cost pieces. So you just send it the cost part, and it will do the calculations.
so the whole XML summary, it's captured the whole thing.
Yes,
Your front end did the whole thing.
Right.
and it's- Okay.
yes.
I was
So,
thinking like somehow in the back you've got all these many-to-one relationships with...
Mm-mm. Now for options, I do use the options as part of the menu items
Yeah, yeah.
so that I can select which options can go where. Okay, just to show a little bit on menu items. So those are the different menu items. That's an item number. Is it currently available on the menu so that they can actually drop something from the list if they wanted to, but not delete it? What category it falls into, how many calories, the cost, and a couple of other, the description, and it goes through breakfast, lunch, and dinner here, but due to limitations, I cannot show all the different lists or all the different items that it uses on a view, because there are 30 different options available for each item. So same type thing. So for the options, in order to add an option, you can just select from a list of available options. Yeah, and it just does a lookup on the other list. It references the ID of that lookup item in order to calculate all the pieces and parts. And it has 5 rows of checkbox options on that screen and 2 rows of your radio buttons. So they have your different groups of options and then sets of radio buttons. Since the whole concept wasn't fully completed, I didn't make the data input screen look as intuitive in order to figure out where everything was going to be placed on the screen. But you can actually group your different options by where they're placed in the list. And it goes down to your 10 different options. Okay, so now that we've seen that piece, go back. Okay. So the code that it took to make this. Pull up the, find where my mouse is. Hiding here. Okay. Yay, fun. I'm sure you're familiar with.
I hate code.
Oh, you hate code?
Use that, I hate it.
So, in this, I'm not gonna go over the entire code bank, because as I said, 2,000 lines of code. That'll take me quite a while to go through. So I'm just going to go through some of the key pieces that I have. I started off making sure I have some global variables where I set my arrays that I'm going to be using, and all this is of course client side. So it's storing all this data on your computer temporarily to process. Okay.
You did all this in a weekend?
I did the initial piece in a weekend. So I was able to make the list and then take that list and show it using HTML in something that looked a lot like what they currently use. So, let's see, here we go. So here I'm using a little bit of JQuery in order to extract a list. So I'm using an AJAX command with jQuery basically to get a list. And so I'm telling this computer to call back to SharePoint and to pull information out of a SharePoint list and put it into memory. It uses a couple of interesting ways in order to find it. When it puts it into memory, it puts it in as a variable it's an object type variable that has all these pieces within it. And it took a while to figure out how to find that variable. It's found in one that's called data.d.results. And so in order to make it simple on how I use it, I just take that results, that object, and put it into another variable that I can use that's shorter. I go through then and find the length, how many objects do I have in this list, and I go through a loop and I push those objects individually into an array that's sitting on the computer that I can then use, because I'm going to be grabbing a bunch of different lists. I don't want to mix the data and confuse what it is that I'm calling it. So I give it another array name. So this one is the menu array main because it's my main list of menu items. And I go through all the different pieces that are in that list. So the list columns that you see, I have to call in here. One key thing to note, when you create a list column, the very first time that you create it and you name it, whatever that name is what has to be used in this code. So if you change the name later on, the name that this code uses does not change. It's whatever you called it at the very beginning.
You can't scrap the code and had a copy and put the copy in place or anything?
In order to change, if you do that, you have to delete the list,
Okay.
recreate the list with the name you want it to have. Because SharePoint will, whatever you created as the first,
Right.
that's what it gets. That's what it's stored at. All you're doing from then on is just changing the name of that, but not what it's actually called in the back end. And here you can see where I've loaded the different options. I load them into 3 different sections of just options. So I'm kind of creating an array of option items that I then later add to my array. So I've got an array of arrays, or an array, yeah. But with JavaScript, it all figures out how this all goes. So after I go through, now I've got my list in memory, and I can start doing something with it. Here's a little bit shorter list that I do the same thing with my list of categories. And so it's the same thing. It's an AJAX call. The $ in front of it means that it's jQuery. It's another get. I go through, it's data D results is the same thing when I'm pulling the information. I look for how many items are in it, and then go through an array, and then I create a menu array of categories, and I push each item individually into that array. Here's where I have my column name is order 1, where there wasn't an original, there was an order, and I didn't use that particular order because it was the wrong type or something. I created another one, created as order 1. That's the name I have to use. No matter if I change it to say order, that shows up when you're inputting the information in the list, you can change it back to order, but you have to use the original when you're going through it. Okay. Here's where I go through and set a lot of my different variables as far as that are used throughout the program. I've got some of the initial variables where I set what day it is. I went through and for some of the demonstrations that I was doing in order to see what I was doing, it was late at night, so on a Sunday. Well, I have no menu that works on Sunday, so I had to trick it into what day it was, and so I added an extra line of code in there to tell me it was Friday instead of Sunday. But it goes through, it gives me what current day it is, what current time it is, so that it knows what menu to use at what particular time and what you can order from and what you cannot order from. And then I go through, okay, what, can I order from breakfast weekday or lunch weekday, or turn them on and off as the time needs. And then I've got, do I want to display order buttons? Because if I want them to order dinner, but not order lunch and breakfast, I have it turn on and off the buttons that allow you to add to the cart. And then at the bottom, I've got who can order for who. It looks at who the delegates are, who the mess members are, and has ways to figure out who can order for who, and puts in their actual name instead of like their user ID. It gives an actual first and last name and figures that out from where it is. Okay. And then I can change the meal hours by going through this piece and change the time that the meals begin. Like for here, I adjusted the dinner to end at 11 o'clock at night, so I knew that I wouldn't run out of dinner. Because if it ends at 7, normally, we wouldn't have been able to order dinner for the last hour. So I extended that. But in order to change meal hours, it's just a simple change of a value here. And then the meal hour changes, and it displays the new meal hour on the form. So the next section is where I actually start taking all my arrays that I've collected and start actually building a menu out of it. I've got 2 different arrays that I start off with. One is my main menu items, and one's my specials. In this piece, I take my main menu and I start adding the option names into that particular piece. And so it looks through and says, okay, for this particular item, you selected to have 3 different options. So I'm going to add those 3 option names to the list where they belong, so that I can then use that as part of one consolidated list. I'll do the same thing with my specials array and combine both of those different lists into one list, one consolidated list. So it goes through the different kinds of radio. It's got radio options. The top one here adds the checkbox options. And then it pushes that into my menu array, giving me, this is my main list that I use throughout all the process. And I said, then I'm doing the same thing for my specials. So it's the same code, it just with a different initial array. And there's a lot of, as I said, I'm not going to be able to go through everything or else it's going to change. There's code in here for finding out which account people are on and who they can do the delegate and who can order for who. And so this part goes through and looks at what the ordering times are. So I had different menus were available at different times. So it goes through and looks, when was the start of breakfast? And how many, did I give it an hour? Can they start early to order breakfast? And when is the end of breakfast? And what day of the week is it? And with all that information, it will then set different variables. So like if it goes through and matches the breakfast, then my breakfast for weekday ordering is equal to true, and my start menu is the breakfast menu. And it goes and does that for all the different menus. And then when it finds out which one is the active ordering menu, it'll go through and I'll change the color of the menu time to be green. And that's what this section here does, is it goes and finds the element by an ID and says, okay, I want that particular element to be the color green. So now I can see on my list of available menu times, the one that's green, that's the menu I'm currently ordering from. Then after I put all that together, I then want to display this on the screen for people to see. So here is my menu display, and I'm just pulling out the one for dinner. So I go through and put the dinner, on the dinner and weekend menu. I'm giving it, I put in a little version number just so I keep track of what version of code that I'm using. And I've got one section. The first one is if you're able to order, it gives me a view cart button that goes with that line. If I'm not able to order, I delete the view cart button, because if you can't order, there's no use having a cart. And that's the top part of the screen. And just to go back and as a refresher, so we've seen like green color for what I'm currently in, and this first section up here where it has the dinner and weekend menu and the view cart button. So we've generated that piece of HTML that goes on there. This piece up here, the top part, shows up on whatever screen this is currently showing, whatever menu it has, it always has that one piece. So then in the middle here, I've got a section here that goes for menu display items. So all the different items that I have, it goes and calls another function that will generate that particular menu item, and then will generate another one after that and another one after that. It goes through the different categories, and so that's why I pull the list of categories in. So it goes through, and when I pull the list of categories, it will sort the categories by whatever order I I wanted it to be, and then it will go through that first category. It'll find all the menu items for that category and then display that particular menu item with the options for that shows the calories, the description, the title, and the price. Along with, if you can order, it will show an add to cart button. And then at the bottom of the page, when it's finished with that, it goes and adds another finalize order or another cart view cart button at the bottom to view the cart. So that gives you your bottom of the page along with a back to the top of the page if you're sitting at the bottom. So your menu display items, it goes through and finds, it goes through and reinitiates counts every time it goes through it, and goes through your menu array and then looks for the different categories, looks for whatever menu you happen to be on, and finds the items for that particular menu, and then it'll give you different options that go in to view or to show what each piece. And so this took me, this piece here I've managed to do overnight, but I've refined it many times, so it's a lot cleaner now than it was at the original onset. So this was after many months of trying to figure out the most efficient way to manipulate the different lists. And so it goes through, okay, is it breakfast? Then I want to use this one. If it's lunch, I want to use this one. And so on and so forth. It goes through and figures out which menu it is. And then it starts creating the different piece. Here you can see where it's starting to add the calories. You have, is it vegetarian, heart healthy, gluten-free, or kosher? And it has icons that it adds to that piece. So it's building that HTML to create it. So I'm creating image tags that finally go into the piece. After I've built all the different pieces that go with it, then I go through and I go through another function that's just the display item, and I feed it all the information that I've just generated for that one piece. And whether it be breakfast, lunch, or dinner, then I can go through, and here's the actual HTML. Now, I know tables are usually frowned upon, but this is a perfect example of where you can use a table. So I just create another, I've created a table on the page, and so all I'm actually doing is I'm taking this piece of a table and adding it, I'm appending it to a table that I have that's called menu items. There's a table on the page that has an ID called menu items, and I'm just taking this table, the inside piece of the table code, and appending it into that. And so you can see the different pieces where it has the item, it's got the cost, does it have an order button, the description, the calories, is it vegetarian, heart healthy, gluten-free, kosher, and there's a nice divider line in order to divide the different items. So. And then here's one that if you cannot order, it just takes out all the add to cart buttons that would be as part of this order.
In that case, if they can't order, they're just viewing the menu. Is that
Right. So if they can't order,
just viewing
they just view the menu. So they could, if I want to order something, this has the ability to do lunch up to 7 days in advance. You can see the lunch menu 7 days in advance. So if I want to find, I've got some friends that are coming, and we want to all go down and eat something, I can say, this is what is going to be served, what do you want? And you can see it, but you can't order anything yet. Or if it's breakfast time, you want to find out what's for dinner, you can't order dinner yet.
Yeah, I get it.
And let's see here. So after we've got everything on the page, we've got our add to cart. Now the nice neat little box that comes up that shows the options. Like this one creates that. I take and I've got a another a div that has a table inside the div with an ID that's called view item. And so,
Where did you pull them in pop-up?
so the pop-up, so yeah, I use XML, or I use, well, the pop-up I use,
That's summary text.
yeah, the summary text.
That's what you have up
I mean, there are many pop-ups.
The one that shows the options,
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
So this code right here actually creates the pop-up piece.
And where did you pop it up?
So this current one, in some cases you can find ones that kind of move around. This is static. But on the page, I have, I'll show you the page at the end and some of the pieces that I put on the page. But there's a div, if you're familiar with HTML. And inside that div is another table. And that div has an ID, or actually the table has the ID of view item. So then I take, and in this, I generate HTML code that I put inside that table. And then I turn on the table. I go through and I want to show, I do a command up here that says view item show. So I turn it on. It's kind of, it's hidden, but since nobody's looking at it, I don't want to see it. So then I show it, and then I add all the pieces and parts within that item. Now, in order to make it work, I've got to show it first. Then I can add stuff to it, because if it's hidden, it doesn't necessarily, it has problems finding the piece of code or the div that you're looking for on the page, because it doesn't exist on the page per se.
Is the pop-up that you're referring to, when you pop up, you can add tomato, ketchup?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
I just wanted.
So I go through and find my different options, my radio options, my checked box options, and pull them for the particular item that you checked the add to cart. And then I go through and create my HTML and add my option boxes, add a couple that I was playing with, so it has a value of milk or something that I left in there, because I was playing with how to use some of the different values that are available in the different input types. But I give it, what type is it? Is it a radio? Is it a checkbox? I give it a name, so is it radio option number 2, radio option number 3, number 4, number 5. And they're all set up in rows within a table. And then I just take and append all that within the pop-up box, and it shows up inside the pop-up box. I was starting to work on a third radio option, a third row, but never finished that, but I left some of the code in there in case I wanted to go to a third row. So then it says I'm going through, and view item was the table that I was going into, and so now I'm just appending inside that table.
You said that the pricing were done at the server?
The
And this
pri-
is on
well,
Office 365.
The pricing, the official pricing is done on the point of sale system.
Okay.
But you have all the different pricing. It'll calculate out
Yeah, the
what your,
calculation, where
it'll calculate
on
for,
the server level?
it's all done client
The
side.
client, okay.
Because all this code is in your computer
Mhm.
being done on the client side.
Okay.
So the summary, what you showed like in a XML file, that is actually going to for the actual order.
Right. When you place the order, it showed up with that box that showed an XML summary. That gets generated into a text file, and then that text file gets placed in the point of sale system, and then from there, the point of sale system will then take over and will do all the pricing. It goes through and says, okay, you ordered a hamburger, I need to send this particular order to the grill. Or if you ordered a salad, it goes to the salad section. Or if you ordered a dessert, it goes to another station. But the point of sale system is what does that piece. This just takes all the different options that a person wants and then gives them an indication as to how much it's going to cost them, what did they order, and generates the code that the point of sale system can understand to know what they just ordered. I actually had to contact the people who made the point of sale system and get their instructions on how to speak to it through files. Their API is you pop a file in this directory and it reads it. But I had to figure out how was that file comprised? How do you build that file?
Yeah, I came up with how that works.
So then here builds the finalized order where I've taken all the different pieces and just wrapped it up into a piece of text, and I just display the text. I don't create individual lines as it goes. As I'm building all this in, I'm creating the file that I display for the people to see what their final order is. And so all I have to do in this section is just put out order box text, and it shows what your order is. And along with that, here's where I've got an alert that shows the XML summary, and that's what popped up at the end of the order when you ordered. So it shows what the XML summary is what the file is that goes to the point of sale system. And here's another. This is the kind of the final piece on this. Is you have you're talking back to SharePoint. I've pulled lists. Now I need to save what that order is to a SharePoint list for record keeping, and also to start generating the emails that go to the people who place the order so that they can know the status of their order. And so within this, I'm using another JQuery, but instead of a get, I'm posting. So I'm posting to a SharePoint list. Now, in order to post to a SharePoint list, there's a couple of weird things that you have to do as far as things that you have to tell the system in order to prepare it for receiving the list data. So you have to give it like a request digest value, and you have to generate that value based upon what list you're sending it to. And so this here grabs some of the information that's used in order to create the pieces that it's looking for. So it goes through and it takes like a SharePoint data, and it chops up the name of the list a specific way and then feeds it back to the list when you're sending the post, because it's looking for a specific format. So it knows what list to go to. What kind of list is it? Is it a calendar list? Is it a custom list? Just certain things so that it knows how to handle it. So that's a quick overview of the code. Let me go through and just show you the page. Okay, so I have different sections, or these are script editor web parts that I put onto the page to insert the pieces. Okay, so then after you create a script editor web part, you can look at the different snippets. And here I load my jQuery. Here I also load my CSS file. And I load a secondary file that I have for when I'm doing my editing. This is the CSS2 is kind of the file I use to show a little bit more, because when I take that piece out, I take all the SharePoint stuff that's on the page around the edges, and it's just a blank screen. So instead of showing your left navigation and your top navigation, I remove all those from the page for the user. But I put that back in when I'm doing the editing. And so these are the tables that I was speaking of. So I've got a table with an ID of menu select. So that's the top piece that tells you who's ordering, who's the person that's doing the ordering, who they can order for. Goes through and says what the order times are. Is it the lines that has the breakfast, lunch, and dinner selectors in order to change menus. Menu items, which is the second one, goes through, and that's where all your different menu items, where I fill the HTML for that. I've got an order submit. So when you click on your cart and it shows the cart, it takes out it hides the menu items and then shows this order submit section. And then the div ID is the view item, and that's your individual checkboxes for your options, your pop-up for the different options. And then for trying to get the code to work the way I wanted it, the very last part of the page, and deferred, so it's the very last thing loaded. After everything is loaded, I actually load my script code that generates everything. If you load it too soon, it's looking for pieces that aren't on the page yet. So you have to wait until the entire page is drawn in memory, and then you load the code, which then takes care of everything else. So what questions do you have?
I have a question as feedback. I think that this is a incredible presentation. It's a great case study. I like how you walk through the code and took it step by step. Solid. I don't know if that's a question. Question.
Okay.
It's solid. My question.
And
Let me ask this.
yes, go ahead.
If, since you basically brought this into Office 365, if you were given this requirement today, how would you approach architecture? What would change? What would be some of the things that you would do different? Knowing what you know from going through this whole challenge.
I'd probably get them to commit to being able to move the point of sale system before I got this far. I was hoping that even if they weren't able to use the point of sale, that they might still want to use this piece and go ahead and do the manual transfer just to save the time of ordering by phone. But I haven't talked them into that yet. But there might be some new people around, so things may change.
It would be helpful if it generated by one list.
Yeah.
And they got it, they just print it out, and somebody just says, oh, they want, they would know what the codes are, they type a couple things in.
Yeah.
They don't have to listen to anybody.
Also, the nice thing of this is it doesn't have to be used for food menus. You can use it for ordering any kind of item. You can use it for ordering T-shirts. Do I want a green, blue, or yellow T-shirt? Do I want it? What size do I want it? How many do I want?
Are these the official prices, or are they going to be changed?
Some of them, I think, are just made up. I think I made up some of them. Some of them actually are official prices that they were using. Some of them I made up.
Well, behind the scenes, you use an Excel spreadsheet to load it.
We wish.
We tried to at first. Now, I was able to use a spreadsheet on the on-prem version,
Right.
but I wasn't able to do that for the Office 365. For some reason, it would not import from a spreadsheet. I don't know why. I've seen. I could, but I haven't played with apps yet. As I said, yet. I have another job. This one was just kind of thrown at me like, okay, you can go ahead and spend some of your time and see if you can make this work. But you could actually turn it into an app that you could load.
Great job.
Okay? Thank you.
Yeah, very
That's
nice.
amazing.
Thank you.